Okay, last 2 weeks, I already showed you about resource aggregation. Okay, resource aggregation, and when we do the work program or the scheduling, not only that we need to input list of activities, we need to input duration, we need to input the predecessor, we need to also input resources. Because if you remember in one of the first week of the class, Introduction to Planning, what is the purpose of scheduling actually? It's basically to to basically to fully optimize the utilization of resources. So that's why we do the scheduling. Otherwise, we do not know when shall we bring in the material, the man, the machine, and what type of machinery, what are the output of the machinery, the productivity of the what we call man, and later on how much money that we need to spend for that month, and the differences between the money in and money out. Later on, you will learn about cash flow. That will be in one of the topic covered by the other lecturer. Okay. Okay, now problem related to labor. Okay, planning on labor resource, resource smoothing, and you notice this wording is now coming out into our terminology: resource smoothing and resource labeling. Okay, this is what I was trying to mention last 2 weeks, but now we are going into the example. Okay, remember when we talk about resources, okay, resources, the main resources would be man, machine, and material. This is what we call machine, material, okay, man. And these resources in construction, we can relate this thing as direct cost. We call it direct cost. And majority of the construction costs basically will be coming from these resources. I would say maybe around 90%. Okay. If we split them equally, man, machine, and material, so each of these thing would be around 30%, 30%, and 30%. But it depends very much on the type of the construction. For instance, infrastructure works or heavy engineering work might involve a lot of machineries and material wise compared to laborers. Okay. Similarly, if you are using IBS technology in construction, so we do not use a lot of laborer anymore. So most of the cost will be coming from the material itself and the machine. You see, so the composition could be could basically differ from one project to another type of the project. But anyway, being 10%, 20%, or even 25% is basically is a very big amount that we need to manage. Remember, in construction, very simple formula: total cost plus profit equal to value, what we call contract value. So contractor basically is given a contract by the client. So this is the client that pay client, and total cost is the one that contractor have to bear. And out of this total cost, there is a what we call direct cost. I name it DC, and then indirect cost. So direct cost is the one that we mentioned related to man, machine, and material. Okay, man, machine, and material, the three major things. How about indirect cost? Indirect cost could be the preliminaries. You can check on the spelling. Preliminary item such as the site office, utility bills, tracking, and controlling is part of the preliminary costs, because in tracking we need to do inspection, we need to do testing, we need to do meeting, we need to report. All the paperwork, all the computer software can be part of this preliminary. But preliminary is not much. Maybe if you are familiar with the contract, it could be around maybe 5%, depending on how big is the project. If you calculate 5% out of 1 billion, that is a lot already. So that's why the range would be, I would say anything would be less than 10%. Less than 10%. Whereas the 90% could be due to indirect cost. And how much is the profit? That is the issue. How much do contractor make profit? For instance, if contractor manage to do all the work according to the specification, so basically contractor need to pay for all the costs. But another issue is basically the profit. Contractor as a businessman need to make profit. So how much is the profit? So it again depends. Well, we just simply take the one that we know. Okay. How do we know the profit of the contractor? Well, simple. If you go to public listed company in Malaysia, we do have Kuala Lumpur Stock Exchange. So the company which is public listed on the BOSS, basically they need to report their income and expenses, including all the tax and whatnot. And normally based on the reported reported company, the profit from contractor could be around 10%. This is what we call net profit after tax. See, after deducting all the things. We are not talking about gross profit. Gross profit would be more, but after deducting a few things, and then what remain is around maybe 10%. Initially, contractor might put around maybe 15% to 25% of the profit in terms of calculation. But at the end of the day, due to lack of controlling, contractor might lose a lot. Okay, might lose a lot, and then at the end of the day, end up to be like 10%. 10% itself is still a good profit. Okay, if you get 1% profit, 2%, it's still a profit anyway, because you already cover all the total costs. But getting more profit is much better, because you can always use some amount of money in order to use that as a capital to expand your business, and etc. etc. So to get this 10% of profit is also very difficult. You need to control the project very tight. Otherwise, you are not going to get this amount. So you just imagine if the cost of the manpower is around 30%, that is a huge amount that you need to manage. Okay, so you need to manage everything. Otherwise, you will end up losing. That is the issue. Okay, problem related to labor. What could be the problem? We can sum up the problem into our fishbone diagram here. Okay, fishbone diagram. Okay, let's take a look at what could be the issue. Unskilled labor. This is the ongoing issue. As in Malaysia, remember 80% of our construction workers we are getting from foreign workers. Okay, foreign workers normally come from so-called poor country. Okay, traditionally they might be coming from Indonesia, Bangladesh, even Vietnam, Philippines, any other country which is, by comparison to Malaysia, we can consider as a not much a better off company nation. When they are in their country, normally their profession is not construction workers, because there are not so much activity with regard to construction. Only when they come to Malaysia, then they start learning about construction. So that's why unskilled labor will pose a lot of issues, such as quality issue, poor workmanship, and then low productivity. It will also affect, you know what, safety, accident. Accident normally happen due to poor understanding of the hazard at construction site, such as new workers, inexperienced workers. And then what else? Lack of experience and training. Okay, now, if those workers are not what we call skillful, and then why don't company train them? This is another issue. Okay, in Malaysia, we must remember SME. SME is what we call small and medium enterprise. Our construction company, 90% from the record is coming from small and medium enterprise. They are not a big contractors. Big contractor, normally you don't have any problem. Let's say you are doing your master project, okay? You want to do some kind of survey based on whatever issues. If you do survey on big construction company, they normally do not have any problems, because everything that we learn in our class, for instance, a good construction practice, they are implementing that at construction site. But when you go to a small company organization, they do not want to invest because they themselves also having difficulties in maintaining what we call quantity of work. They never know. They might get a project now and then might not get a project next year. So it is not certain. So they tend not to invest on many things, especially on the new technology, on the machineries, and even on the training. That is the issue. So at the end of the day, people basically go by every day to work without knowing too much of the detail. They just simply follow or just learn, just simply learn while doing the work. So they tend to make mistake. That is the issue. Certification. Some of the, because mostly of these workers do not go to proper school or technical institution that they get certification to benchmark their skill. So it is very difficult, especially in terms of payment. But now CIDB Malaysia, CIDB is our authority with regard to construction industry, is trying to tackle this thing by certify people on site. But that thing will take I would say will take ages, because again, company might delay in terms of cooperating with the authority to certify their workers, or even to certify the supervisor or personnel at construction site. And then poor supervision. Okay, lack a supervisor. If you do have a site experience, perhaps you can relate this idea, this point. In even in our construction site, sometimes if comparison in terms of the volume of the work, 1 million worth of the project, 1 million ringgit worth of project, they might have one supervisor. How about 10 million? Sometimes 10 million also, they also have one or even sometimes two, the most supervisor. How about 100 million? Or they might add a few more, one or two. But in terms of comparison, 1 million of work, 10 million of work, 100 million and 1 billion, there are a lot of things that supervisor need to do or need to tackle, need to cater, need to look at the unskilled construction workers to tell them what to do. So in terms of number, they are not in what we call in line with the volume of work. And this is what is happening at the construction site. Again, the owner of the construction company always thinking how to reduce costs, but they are not thinking about when they reduce number of people, they will have an implication in terms of productivity of the works. That is the issue. And lack of experience. Again, In order to properly supervise a project, you need to have some kind of knowledge, skill, and experience. We normally pay a lot to experienced workers compared to people who just simply graduate, because you know when you graduate, even though you have master degree, not much that you know actually, because construction most part based on experience. Okay, there are certain part that require some kind of knowledge and skill, yes, but then majority of the thing will be coming from real experience. Inappropriate monitoring and control, as I mentioned, we need to have some kind of system in order to monitor and control things. Sometimes people are just simply lazy. Once they think that we do whatever thing, we still make money. So why bother? Why bother to do a proper monitoring and control, because we still make some kind of profit. It might not as what we expect, but at least the profit is there. That is the thinking, that is the issue. But right, once you set a certain amount of profit margin, then you must basically work very hard in order to achieve those things. And then from that profit margin, then basically you can share to everybody in your work organization as a bonus, as an incentive. That's how you motivate the workers or the people to stay with you, okay, with your organization. In construction or in management, we do have the issue of to how to make people loyal to organization. Okay, one of the issue could be the issue of incentive. Then unreliable subcontractor. Sometimes the main contractor who got the project is good enough, but being a general contractor or main contractor, you are not going to do the project or work 100% by yourself. You normally will subcontract some of the work. So you as main contractor is okay, doing fine, but then the issue with the subcontractor, you never know. Okay. And then nowadays we do have in Malaysia, normally subcontractor, when you subcontract the work, they will do the work, they will get they will find the workers in order to execute the work. When the work is not up to standard, then basically you can deduct the payment, you can penalize the subcontractor. But nowadays the issue is that there are subcontractor who basically supply labor only, supply labor only. So people are making business out of this supplying workers only. So their job is basically find the workers from whatever countries. This is the issue. Okay, sometimes the workers are being cheated. They pay a certain amount of money in order to get into a country like us, but then there is no job available for them. They just simply being promised, because once they pay, the agent basically will get the money already. That is the issue, that is ongoing issue. It is not happening in our country, but many countries. There are middlemen who basically making profit out of these labor issues. Okay, so there are people who are making business out of supplying labor, but again, we also never know. Sometimes we demand like okay, 20 workers. Okay, we get that 20 workers, but then we can only know their quality after they start working. By that time, we want to get the replacement. Then the agent will say, "Oh, okay, we are trying to get the replacement. We are running short of people." Now you get stuck with the poor, unskilled workers again. That is the issue. Slow mobilization. Okay, the word mobilization reflect or can be equated to you bring in your equipment at the beginning of the project. That is what we call when the start of the project, because majority of the equipment are not being allowed to be on the road. You need to transport them. That's what we call mobilization. And then when you complete your project, your demobilization. Okay, it's just like an army. When army go into certain place, so the same terminology, they mobilize and demobilize. Okay, that would be another issue, the start and the end of the project. But the most critical issue is basically the running everyday supply of manpower. Okay, everyday supply of manpower. So that's why in Malaysia we do construct workers' housing, especially in the construction, within or inside the construction project, which is not supposed to be by right. If you go to many so-called developed nations, they do not allow workers to stay on the construction site. They should stay outside the construction site at a proper place. We in Malaysia, we are going into that kind of uh, setting up also, but it is a matter of time. Okay, now government is trying to push so that nobody shall stay at the construction site. If you want to construct the housing for them, you should construct them at a proper place or rent them at a proper place so that you can manage them, so that the welfare of the workers should be taken care of, and the safety issue, security issue, the health issue, everything should be in accordance to whatever law. We already have the law, but in terms of implementation, it will take some time. Okay, so if, for instance, the workers are being put or coming from anywhere, they stay at their home, for instance, how do you get them to the construction site? And that is the issue. Okay, because normally when we construct a new construction, we construct in a place where nobody stay there. And in order to go into that construction site, also you need to have a four-wheel drive. Okay, so that is the issue. Unlike the factory, if you know, we do have factories scattered everywhere in the countries. And you know what? Factory operate 24 hours, 3 shifts. You just imagine the people do not stay in the factory, they stay everywhere. But the logistic in terms of manufacturing compared to construction is much better. People from that live everywhere, okay, sometimes as far as 10 kilometers, they can always manage to get to the factory on time because of the logistic. But in construction, we do not have that kind of efficiency as compared to manufacturing. Maybe because of the access to the site, and then construction site keep moving. Once you complete the one project, and then we start a new project. So we understand the difficulties, but then that is the issue that should be managed as well. And then lastly, shortage. This is the issue that we want to relate to the planning. Okay, the shortage of the worker in terms of number, when they are coming, maybe if they are coming not at the right number due to majority of poor planning. The poor planning basically is the one that we are the one that do the planning. So the fault is basically on us. We can do something that in order to solve this thing. So we are focusing on this issue, poor planning. Strike. We do have small scale of strike, not a big one as in the Western world. Sometimes they do have a big union if they are not satisfied with something, and then the whole nation will be on strike. But in Malaysia, in small scale, sometimes if the payment is late, okay, and the workers are not satisfied with something, then a group of people will not be coming to the construction site, and then you will get stuck with the productivity. Because if, for instance, a crane operator is not coming, the majority of the work you can simply cannot do. That is an example. Absenteeism. This is another issue. Okay, you need to get to understand why people do not come to the workplace. Maybe because of the stress, If we understand people are not happy when working, then we need to find what could be the factors, try to solve this thing. Okay, so this is the part and parcel of trying to settle this shortage. But our objective is basically to focus on poor planning, because some of the issue with regard to the supply of the laborer, sometimes we just simply cannot resolve, because it is nationwide issue. It involves business, politician, and whatnot. But in terms of planning, we can do something, because we are the one that do the planning at the first place. Okay, so our focus is how to basically make sure that there is a sufficient number of workers in terms of planning. Okay, all right. Poor planning may identify as contributing factor, and then what else? Okay, now project planning, time driven. You notice I highlight time driven and resource driven. What is this is all about? Okay, let me explain this. Okay, first, what is this thing? Time driven. Okay, time driven. So if you still remember, in Microsoft project, in option, we do what we call, remember, we do fixed unit, and then fixed duration. Okay, fixed unit and fixed duration. And then another one is fixed work. Fixed work is simply when you time unit with duration, that will be fixed work. So in our exercise, Microsoft project, we choose fixed duration. And in reality, fixed unit could be more realistic. Okay. Okay, now time driven. Okay, time driven, for instance, let's say activity piling. This is the name of the activity. And then this is duration. And then resources. Okay. Let's say whatever it is, duration is basically based on calculation as well. Let's say we identify our duration as 10 days. And what could be the resources? Let's say 10 days, we use 2 piling rig. That could be the resources. Okay. So we fix the duration. We want piling to be completed in 10 days. But then we figure out how many piling rig in order to meet our objective. So this is what we call time driven, okay, based on time. Another situation, what we call resource driven. The same item there, piling. We fix the piling rig. Depend on the situation. Maybe we can only get 1 piling rig. Okay, piling rig. This is what we call resource. So based on what we fix, then what could be the what we call duration. Automatically, from the equation, you understand. If 10 days, then we need 2 piling rig. If it is 1 piling rig only, automatically, you will need to extend your work 20 days. Because the available machine is only 1. Okay, so both situation basically is the one that we people use in the construction industry, actually, without even people realizing. Okay, without realizing the concept, people have been using that thing again and again. So there are two scenarios here. So this one, resource driven, we are going to relate to what we call the concept of resource leveling. Okay, the concept of resource leveling. Whereas the time driven, we are going to relate to the concept of resource smoothing. Okay, resource smoothing. All right, so you see, resource smoothing and resource leveling. Time, in resource smoothing, time is fixed. Okay, time is fixed, whereas resource can be what we call can be adjust according to the time that we already set. Okay, the other way around, resource leveling, the resource is the one that we fix. Based on the fixed resources, then basically we need to adjust the time. Okay, the time now can be adjusted or have to be adjusted. We have no choice. But resource smoothing is the time that we set. We do not want to adjust any timing, but then we can play around with resources. Meaning to say, we have the luxury of choosing number of resources that fit our timing. Okay, so in Microsoft project, you notice fixed duration basically related to this one. Okay, whereas the fixed unit is basically related to this one, fixed unit. So that's why when we set up the option, we learn about this thing first. Okay, but unfortunately, in Microsoft project, this resource smoothing function is not available in the whatever features of menu yet. Okay, for the time being, because it involves a decision. As a planner, you need to take a look at the whole activities and then try to move the activity around within the context of the duration. Then only you can get the right resources. But then in resource driven, basically you set the because it is very easy. You set the resource to whatever that you wish. Then basically you will see it could adjust your timing of activity or even a project. Then basically you need to decide whether it is acceptable or not. Later on, I will show you in Microsoft project. We will continue from the previous example anyway. Okay, resource smoothing in Malay. If you are Malaysia, we call it pelicinan sumber. Resource leveling, we call it pengarasan or penghad. Had meaning to say we limit. Okay, resource leveling, basically we limit the resource. We limit the resource. Okay, whereas resource smoothing, we limit in terms of the duration. Okay, this is the scenario. Maybe you can still remember the resource aggregation or resource histogram. This is example of resource histogram, or in Microsoft project, they call it resource graph. Resource graph or histogram. In what we call statistic, we call histogram diagram. Histogram or resource aggregation, the cumulative amount of resources. Let's say this drawing indicate this is what we call the time of the project, time. This is what we call quantity of labor, quantity of resource. It could be man, machine. We normally do not plot on the material because material could be so many material, unless you are working with the same type of material. For instance, if you are doing work in the river or at the seashore, let's say on the concept of breakwater or revetment, or whether you do some kind of river, some kind of not to the shore of the river or the sea, that basically you are using the same kind of material, maybe different type of sizes of the rock, etc., etc. But in building, there are maybe thousands of the material. We do not do the resource histogram for the material. But for the manpower and machinery, we can do that. Let's say this is month number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Let's say we do the plotting, month number 1, 2, 3 until 8, and you notice this is the quantity of laborer that we are going to use. Let's assume, let's assume, where is it? Okay, let's assume this is maybe this one is 50, this one could be 90, this one could be 100, this one could be 60, this one could be 40, this one is 50, this one is 70, this one is 30. Okay, in terms of number of workers. So what happened is that, so you start the project with 50. Okay, 50 is fine. Then suddenly increase to 90. Maybe it is still okay, for the first month and the second. And then for the third month, just imagine from 90 into 60. So 30 people are missing here. Where do you want to put the rest of 30 people? You must remember, for the construction workers, they are being paid based on the work. If there is work, then there is payment. Unlike we as a professional, or when you become engineer, you are being paid as monthly basis. Your salary is on monthly basis, regardless whether that day is basically having work or not. Let's say the whole day is raining, there is no work, but your salary is going on. But for the workers, if we know that a few days will be raining, and then we ask the workers not to come, then basically there is no payment. Even the worst scenario, sometimes the workers, when they go to the clinic, you know what? They need to pay by themselves. They are not being covered by the employer in certain situation. You see, that is the issue. So as for the workers might not like this kind of situation where there will be some work going on, and then the other month no work. So there is not a consistent income for themselves. They will try to get a project which basically can give them consistent income. So the issue of demotivation, workers demotivation. So we try to avoid what we call, this is what we call peak, the word peak, and trough. What we call trough. Trough is basically the valley, peak and valley, in a simple word. Peak and valley. The lowest one, it will be the valley. Okay. Try to avoid peak and valley. Okay. The issue is that you notice the dotted line here. The dotted line indicate the end of the project. End of project. Okay. And can we transform this diagram to become like this? So meaning to say, if we want to increase the number of workers, we increase gradually, not rapidly, then this is the peak. Peak of the project is okay, because in real construction work, normally project will start a little bit slow and then picking up and then reach the peak once you already completed the structural work, as in Malaysia. Then you start with the architectural work, then basically reduce number of the workers. Then the project will end. See, end of the project here. Okay, this is what we call a good resource graph. Good graph. Okay. This is the left side is basically the bad graph. Can we do something in order to transform the resource requirement from having all kind of peak and valley situation into this one? And you know what? We can do this by going back to our scheduling. Remember, scheduling, we are the one that do the scheduling. So at the end of the day, when we plot the graph, maybe at the beginning of the day, you might not see the graph yet. You just simply input all the data, and then only when you plot the graph, oh, suddenly you look at the graph, it looks very bad. Okay, then what you need to do, you can adjust so that it become like this. You notice that the end of the project remain the same. On the 8th month, we do not touch anything. So meaning to say, we fix in terms of the duration. We only play around with the total float of the activities. Remember, why do we calculate total float on the first place? Not only that we need to know the critical path, because when the total float equal to 0, those activities can be considered as critical activities. When we connect critical activities together in a path, they are being called critical path. That is the one of the example, the usage of what we call total float. Another usage of total float is basically we want to play around, okay, play around or move activity around so that certain activity can be can use early start date, whereas some other activity can use the late start date, and some other activity can use in between, not at the earlier start, not at the later start, but in between, as long as they do have total float values. This is the issue. And remember, a good scheduler, when they schedule the project, the final, maybe the final draft of the first submission of the work program to the client, whatever, they already consider everything, including the utilization of resources. And they already plot the resource histogram that looks as a good graph. Okay, compared to the bad one. This is what we call a bad graph, because it will create a lot of problem, especially to the workers. Okay, so this first graph, we call it resource smoothing. Okay, this exercise, we call it resource smoothing. How to become like this, the good graph, later on we will cover into example. Okay, now the second concept, resource leveling. What is resource leveling? Resource leveling is much simpler compared to resource smoothing. It's much simpler. So that's why Microsoft Project and Primavera even have resource leveling function, because it is quite simple compared to resource smoothing. Okay, now, based on the same situation, let's say even the same, this graph also we can use, but now we use different graph. Okay, let's say we plot the resource. When you plot the resource, normally you will plot resources according to the trade. Trade mean carpenter, barbender, concreter, unless you are using the same workers, whereas they become the carpenter, bricklayer, concreter, everything. Normally small project will do that, but for a big project, carpenter, barbender, bricklayer, plasterer are separate people. Okay, so I would say this is a trade. Okay, when you plot a graph, normally you will separate between trade. Let's say this is for the carpenter. Maybe this is the first month, so second month, third month, fourth month, fifth month, sixth month, 7, 8. Let's assume that way. Why there's an empty space there where there is no carpenter working? Because the activity is not there. Okay, when you plot resource histogram, it is based on bar chart where those activity require those trade. If it is no work for them, then there is no plotting. Okay, that is the concept. Okay, now the issue is that, let's say the first month, we require, let's say, 50 carpenter. This could be around 40, no, sorry, this could be around 20. This could be around 60. This could be around 30. Let's assume that's way. You notice there is a dotted line here. Dotted line is where we limit, okay, where we want to limit how many number of workers, the maximum. Let's say this, assume this is not the concept. Okay, let's say we want to limit 30 workers only at all time. Okay, why do we want to limit? Well, there are many reasons. One of the reasons, we better manage. When we limit those into a certain number, we can manage it better, or maybe we could not get more. It is difficult because this month we need more, and then the following month we need less. So it is very difficult to manage. It is better to have one fixed number of people, then we make do with whatever the number of people that we have. Okay. So for the first month, you notice that we can only manage do this portion only if we limit to 30. So how about the rest? Who is going to do that? Well, so the concept of resource leveling, we need to move to another month, for instance. If that month is still empty, is okay. But what if that month also do have activity going on which require the same number of trade, then you have problem. Okay, so meaning to say you need to shift to another month. This one also do have workers that we need to do the work, then you need to shift another month. At the end of the day, if it is too tight, your schedule is too tight, where you limit the number of workers, meaning to say there is a possibility that you need to extend this time duration into next few months. So that's why I mentioned to you, resource leveling, we want to limit the resources, but then we need to sacrifice in terms of the timing. The timing could be extended, okay? The timing could be extended, and if acceptable, we are not going to extend the contract period. Okay, you have to remember there are different timing that we refer here. The contract period, let's say the client give you 2 years. That 2 years normally will not be extended. The client do not like to be extended. Okay, if the client agree to extend that, you will be safe. But you must remember, within that 2 years, there are group of activities that you plan to be completed within this month, and then a group of activity within next month. So we are talking about that group of activities. Okay, we are not talking in terms of the overall project completion. And when client gives you 2 years, normally as a contractor, you can complete everything within 1.5 years actually. But then you are not going to say to the client, you are going to complete in 1.5 years. Okay? Because you know why? If something happened to certain activities, then basically you do not have free time. Then the client will start imposing many unnecessary things. So you are as if you are being put a constant pressure. You do not want that to happen. Okay. Similarly, in university, for instance, normal student will take around 4 years to complete. Can you complete less than that? Yes, you can do that. A good student where they normally take more subject, you can take up to maybe 21 credit hours. Okay, if you do that every semester, for sure you will complete less than 4 years. But you do not want to we do not want to impose that thing as a what we call a standard thing, because not everybody can take 21 credit hours anyway. So normally, the normal situation, we just impose maybe 15 credit, 16 credit is a good credit to take, but then you can play around. So similarly in construction, it basically apply the same concept. So resource leveling. In resource leveling, whether contractor realize it or not, they have been applying this thing for long time ago. Example, tower crane. In one project, for instance, in a very tight space, normally we can only put one tower crane. Even though in real scheduling, certain month we might need 2, the other month we might need 3. You see, but then there is an issue with the space. You cannot basically put tower crane, 3 tower crane, because the space is very limited. So you are doing what we call resource leveling. Because you only have one crane, then basically you need to adjust in terms of the work activity. Not all the activity can be done simultaneously, because the crane itself very difficult to move around in terms of spinning around, okay, to focus on different area at one time. So you just imagine the difficulties. Okay, so example of the both thing, okay, we already mentioned. Okay, again, this is just a repetitious. In a resource smoothing, the first plotting, this could be your first plot, okay, plot of graph. It looks like this. There are peak, there are trough or valley, which is not very good. We do not want this kind of graph, okay? It will have a lot of impact on workers' morale, turnover, productivity, because everything is not certain. We need to basically transform this graph to look like this. Gradual increase, and the peak is there, never mind, and then gradual decrease. How do we do that? This is what we call resource smoothing. We go into resource smoothing exercise. Okay, now, all right. So resource smoothing. Project duration is fixed. We do not touch anything on the project completion date. Okay. Availability to meet the completion date. Okay, we do not touch on that date. Resource is the one that we can play around. Okay. This the third one is basically resource we can play around, meaning to say we can add more resources if we need. Okay, so that is the situation. Now the step, how to do that? The step in order to do resource smoothing exercise. First thing first, okay, first thing first, list all activities. List all activities. List all activities, okay, list all activities according to the early start, and then total float, that would be the first one, and then later start and total float. Draw resource aggregation with regard to this one and this one. Okay, what is this thing is all about? Okay, basically, you need to sort the your activity listing according to table. I would say this is table 1. Table 1, you sort by early start. Okay, first thing, normally in a table, you need to have a 3 column. Okay, 3 column. Okay, first thing first, early start date. Okay, so you put the date, the earliest date first. Let's say the earliest date normally start with 0, isn't it? Early start. Which activity start with 0? Maybe activity A. Okay, then total float. Total float could be 0. Then day number whatever based on your listing. So I would say in terms of table, you need to come up with this column first. Column 1, column 2, and then only column 3. This is like sorting. You sort. Sort according to early start. Okay, next, what could be the second earliest date? After 0, there could be maybe 2. But you notice, maybe there are 3 activity, let's say 2 activity. 2 activity with the same early start date. Maybe activity B and C. Then how are you going to, because you need to sort according to the earliest first. You want to put either B or C. Then what could be your consideration? Okay, because they are both the same date. But then you need to take a look at these values, total float. Let's say, for sure, total float 0 will be prioritized, will be put at the top first. Then only, let's say, other than 0, that activity could be next. Let's say maybe based on this sorting, activity C is the one that being put first, then only activity B. Okay, and you do that the rest of the activity until you complete all the listing. So this is what we call table 1, as mentioned in this one, this concept. Maybe it is quite difficult to understand in terms of what we call sentence, but I just simply give you a simple way. That would be the table 1. And then you will plot the graph. Plot the graph. Plot the graph based on early start table. Based on table 1. Based on table 1. Then you repeat the same thing again. Okay. You repeat the same thing again. But now you also have 3 columns. The first column is this is what we call table 2, late start. This is what we call late start date. This is total float. And then this is the activity. Activity, this is activity. For sure, late start date, the earliest would be 0. Okay. But then this could be A. What could be the next activity? Similarly, you do that. Let's say the next activity based on the total float could be similar to this one, doesn't matter. Okay, if it is similar, then similar. But let's say CB 2, 2, 0, 1. Okay. But how about the rest? Let's say 4, 4. Maybe, again, based on the total float, if you cannot decide, so total float, the least total float will be prioritized first, then second. So this could be D, this could be E. Okay, once you do have this thing, then you plot the graph. Plot graph on table 2, based on table 2. All right. Then, okay, then only you can make comparison. Draw resource histogram, you compare. Okay, now we go into example. Okay, we go into example. We shall take a break. Now is, okay, we stop first. Let me stop the, we shall take a break. Pause record. All right, this is just example. Okay, in this example, normally activity are given, predecessor should be given, and the number of laborer. So you notice, sorry, the number of laborer now is given. Normally, previously, when we do the planning and the scheduling, we never input any laborer. Okay, we just input the duration. So duration should be given also. Other than duration, then we input the laborer, and then what would happen? Okay, to our scheduling. So now, in order to solve this problem, we need to basically draw our either AOA diagram, AON, or PDM diagram. Okay, PDM diagram, AOA diagram, whatever, is just for us to get the what we call early start, early finish. This is what we call early start, early finish. This is what we call late start, late finish. And in terms of drawing the network diagram, you can use either AOA diagram, AON, or PDM diagram, depending on the question given, okay, or the exercise given. Now we are using AOA diagram because it is just simple network, okay. We just want to demonstrate how to basically to draw the network diagram based on the step that I show you. Okay, so based on this AOA diagram, we are getting early start, early finish, late start, late finish, and then the value of total float we also get. And you notice this is the critical path. It is very important to indicate or to note down the critical path. So every information we are getting based on the network diagram. So that's why I mentioned the second half of the class, okay, is basically more like application of scheduling. The first half of the class is just giving you some of the concept, how to basically to draw the network diagram, and then how to apply all based on those information that we are getting from this network. Okay, now this is one example of the application. Okay, then what you can do is basically you already getting all the values. Then you can plot into a table. Okay, this table simply tell everything. Total float is there, early start and late start, value, total laborer, and the activity. This is just the listing of everything. Listing, listing of everything. Okay, we do not sort yet. Okay, next. Next is what we call table 1. This is what we call the step 1 that I mentioned to you. Now we want to do the sorting. Okay, table 1 is the sorting of early start and total float. You notice there is a the first column is column number 1, and if there is contradictory in terms of the timing, for instance here, you notice there are 3 activities basically start at the same time, 5, 5, 5, 5. And the way we do this table is we sort according to the least and the biggest value first. Okay, then only this activity will be what we call put based on our sorting. Then you notice 5, 5, 5. Then how are we going to indicate which activity that we are going to put first? This is the number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4. This is what we call the sorting or the listing based on the sort. So if you do this manually, now we are learning to do this manually. Later on in the computer, there will be a different story. You notice item, this activity, 2, 5, do have total float the least 0. So that's why this item will be prioritized as number 2. Then this item here do have total float 3 compared to this one is 4. So this is prioritized. Then we get this activity to be put number 3. Then the last one is basically number 4. Okay, and then the next activity also have similar thing. But you notice the one which basically have the least total float will be prioritized. This is item number 5. This is item number 6. That's how you basically come up with this listing. What is the purpose of this listing? Is to draw, next one is basically, this is what we call resource histogram. Resource histogram based on table 1, early start and total float sorting, table 1. How do we draw this kind of graph? This kind of graph basically is, I would say, 3-in-1 graph. 3-in-1. Time, total labor. That will be 2 already. Which one is another one? Another one is basically, you see, this one. This is what we call activity name. Activity name. Why do we draw something like this? In Microsoft project, it will not draw something like this because the activity which basically relate to that particular time already being shown there. But in our situation, our activity is being shown here, only in this form. Then we do this network diagram. How are we going to relate? Let's say people ask us, okay, your boss asks you, on day number 9, this is day number 9, day number 9, how many workers do we need at our construction site? Okay, based on this graph, you already know the total here, this one, the total number of workers is basically 11. This is the total. And where do these workers basically work? They are working, 3 of them will be working on activity 2.5, and then 1, 2, 3, 4 will be working on activity 2.3, and the rest will be working on activity 2.4. This is the purpose of this diagram. Okay, if you can do that, then basically you know on day number 9, there are 11 people required to do 3 activities. Where is the activities, or what is the name of the activities? Now the graph already shown you the name of the activities. That is the idea. Okay, now how to draw this diagram? 3-in-1. I would say 3-in-1 diagram. Okay, first thing first, go back to the listing. Okay, you go back to this listing. This is the purpose of having this table. Okay, you look at the first activity, this activity, 1, 2, because we are already sorting them according to the timing. And this graph already have the timing, okay, and also the total number of labor. Okay, so this activity, 1, 2, start on the first day, okay, the first day. And how many number of workers? By right, we should have another one, number of workers here, but number of workers is in this table, 3, okay, 3. So this will be 3. Okay, now how to plot? See, activity 1, 2, this is the name of the activity. Start on day 1, okay, day 1 of the project. And how many days this activity will be running? Duration of the activity. Okay, go back to this one. It's basically 5. 5. By right, we should draw a table so that duration is there. It's easier to look. Okay, you see, this is 5. So that's why we draw one line here. Okay, this to indicate the length of the timing of activity 1, 2. And then how many number of workers do we need? 3. See, this is 3. Now another line. Okay, from that we can draw one box. One box indicate during this timing, this graph will be occupied by activity 1, 2. 1, 2. That is the concept. Okay, now we already finished on one activity. Next activity, 2.5. 2.5 start on day number 5. Basically, we'll continue here, 2.5 here. How many duration of activity days? 2, 4, 2, 4, 6, and 8. Maybe this 13 day, 8 days. It should be 8 days here. 8 days. You can check the duration. How many number of workers is basically 2.5 will be 3. 3. Okay, so you draw another line in terms of timing, 8 days, and then also 3. Now this block is already occupied by activity 2.5. Okay, then you go back to the listing. Next would be 2.3. Start on the same day. So start on the same day is here. Start on the same day, this line, start. How many days? Okay, activity 2.3. Go back to this 2.3 will be 6 days. Okay, will be 6 days. How many workers will be 4? 4. Now, okay, this is how many days? 6 days and then 4. This is how you draw another activity. Then, sorry, go back. Next will be 2.4. Start on the same day, 5th day. Okay, how many duration of the day? 2.4 would be 4% here. 4%. And 2.4, where is 2.4? 5. 5 days. Okay. So you draw, you start on the same day. This is 5 days, and then 4%. This is the block that indicate 2.4. This is how you draw the what we call the resource diagram, 3-in-1 resource diagram. And in Microsoft, it will not draw something like this. It will draw straightforward. Okay, we will show you in the next slide. Okay, you notice activity here, this one, it is like a split. Okay, split diagram. Why it is split? If you go through this listing one by one, okay, until the end, then you basically would be able to get this diagram similar to this one. And in the case of split, this is an example. Let's say the red one, we do have one activity running from day number 2 until day number 8. How many number of people? 10. Okay. But then another activity coming, it start on the day 6 here, this activity. This activity have to be on top of the red block, because the red block already occupy the space on the diagram. But then the length of it, this another activity, the green one, is basically from 8 until 12 here. This one. This is the second block. But since you notice there is empty space here. Empty space here. By right, when we draw the diagram, it should basically fill up. Okay? Because the diagram is a 3-in-1, indicate the timing, indicate the quantity of the laborer, and then the activities. So it should be drawn properly. The right, the end, the final drawing should look like this. So you notice that there is a split between the green block here. Some portion will be on the top of the red, and then some portion will be putting at the base here, because there is an empty space. Okay, empty space here is being put it here. Why we draw something like this? If you go back to this drawing, the most important thing for us to get is this line here. I draw this line. Okay, this line, the outer layer of the line. This is what basically we want to know. How many number of resources at that particular timing. But since we draw 3-in-1, we might as well put or associate the activities. Okay, that is the issue. But the most important thing, we want to know, what is this value? So the outer layer is much more important. Okay, in Microsoft project, the outer layer value will be shown. Okay, why it doesn't draw something like this? Because the in Microsoft project, the activity is already shown in terms of the date there. So you already know which activity belong to that particular date. Okay, so that would be one example. Okay, now, so you will get this kind of graph. You will get this kind of graph. This is for table 1 only. Then you will repeat the same process for table 2. Table 2, you notice late start and total float. Late start and total float. And you do the same sorting. And fortunately for this one, it doesn't have any activity which basically start on the same date. So you simply can sort easily, okay? Sort easily, then you will get the listing of these activities. Then you will start to draw, okay? So you will get this kind of graph based on table 2. Table 2 based on late start sorting. And what you need to do is to make comparison. Which graph is better? Is it graph based on early start? Okay, this I need to erase this thing in order to be able to see the which one is better looking graph. Okay, now, okay, it looks like okay, now if you make comparison, this is the early start graph, and then this is the late start graph. Okay, late start graph. So it looks like late start graph, the table 2 looks much better. Okay, what we can do, we are not going to stop just by comparing between these two graphs and then decide what to which graph we shall basically take, or which scheduling date we shall finalize. What good scheduling should be is basically you just simply take one of these two as a baseline, okay, as a guideline. But then what you need to do is to make adjustment. So you notice that how come we come up with just nice graph? It is like this. This is what we call resource smoothing. The gradual peak, this is what we call peak, and then gradual decrease. Okay, based on the first graph, it looks like this, and the second one, it looks like this, and the final one, it looks like this. Okay, you notice that we take this one as a base, okay, base graph, okay, base, but then there is a not very nice looking peak here. What we can do, we can adjust this thing by moving into this portion here. Why? Because this is the late start. Late start, you cannot move the graph to the right anymore because we already utilized the what we call the total float. We can only move to the left. But if you are using the early start, you can move some of the graph to the right. What does moving thing mean here? You notice certain activity do have total float. If we are using late start, meaning to say, we can move the activity to the left by 3 days, 4 days, or 3 days or this 4 days. This activity, which doesn't have any total float, cannot be moved around anymore. And this is the concept. So meaning to say, how come we get this kind of graph is basically by using late start values, but then certain activities we might use the early start date or in between. As I mentioned to you, a good scheduling should utilize some of the activity using early start, some of the activity using the late start date, and some activity are in between within the total float values. If those activities, such as activity 1 and 2, doesn't have any total float, then there is nothing that you can do. 2, 5 also, you cannot do anything. This one is fixed. It will remain there, regardless of how you move. What is our objective? Our objective is not to go beyond the total project date, 20 days. You notice that? Even though we do this, we still maintain 20 days. This is what we call resource smoothing. Okay? Because the scheduling, we are the one that do the scheduling, and we also the one that can fix the scheduling based on the information that we have. This is what we call the application of scheduling. Okay? Perhaps some of you wonder, why do we need to calculate early start, early finish, late start, late finish date, total float? And now you understand, perhaps, the application of those values basically have something to do with utilization of resources. Okay, now I want to demonstrate resource leveling. Resource leveling is the continuation process of resource smoothing. Once you already have those graphs, because the exercise basically the same, what you can do, you see, list all activity according to early start, total float. Then draw the resource histogram. Then basically you set how many number of resources. Then basically you are done. Okay, it is much simpler. Okay, now let's give example. Activity A, B, etc. Duration of activity. Gang A, gang B. What is this thing? Gang A and B. This is different trade of workers. We cannot mix all the workers together because the work that they do are not the same. Carpenter with a group of carpenter. Bricklayer with a bricklayer. In a big project, that's how the workers are being separated. Because carpenter cannot become bricklayer by nature of their skill, unless in a small project, whereas that person will do everything, jack of all trade. And so that is not our issue. Okay, now we are using AON diagram or PDM diagram. Okay, PDM diagram. But for this simple exercise, which doesn't have any, which only have finish to start relationship, doesn't have any lead, we just simply use AON diagram. Okay. Now, the reason why we develop a network, because we want to know early start date, early finish. This one is late start, late finish. And this one is basically total float value. Everything is there. Is it total float? No, that is the duration. Okay. We can calculate the total float by the total float is the differences between this value. Okay. So in this case, total float is 1. This is not total float. This is just the duration. Okay. So total float value we can calculate. And the one which I indicate here is the critical path. The critical path is here. All right. Now, so we complete the network diagram with all kind of calculation. If you do this thing in Microsoft project, you can just simply easily get all the values without any hassle. And then, what is this thing? This is, sorry, this is in Malay. This is what we call total float. This is early start. Okay. So we do the listing. Okay. We do the listing. You notice 7 and 7 start on the same day, B and C, but the priority go to which one is do have the least total float. So B will be there and then only C. Okay. After doing all the listing, then basically you plot the graph. Okay. You plot the graph and you get this kind of graph. Okay. You notice that in this graph, activity A only requires 6 people. 6, this one is 8, and then there is no activity going on after B, and then only start with C and F. Okay, C and F. What happened is that the dotted line here, we want to set the limit. Set the limit. So leveling meaning to say we set the limit. How many workers that we want to set at all time? Let's assume we set 6 number of workers. six number of workers at all time. So what would happen to our project? Okay, what would happen to our project? Okay, for activity A is okay because we require only 6 people and then we set at 6. Okay, so perhaps that activity can be done during that period. But how about B? You see, you notice B require 8 person, but we only allow, or the available person is only 6. Then what happened is that B has to be extended. Okay, B has to be extended. Okay, some portion of B will be working here if there is space here. If there is no space around, what would happen is that this activity will be pushed forward. This one, it will be pushed forward until perhaps even encroach into the finish timing of the group of these activities. But fortunately, maybe in this situation, it is still okay because we do have some empty spot here where the workers can work on the day where there is no activity overlapping. Okay, but there is another situation where we will see in our next example. We are going to encroach into different what we call project activity. Okay, so we stop. Okay, stop this share. All right, so that will be based on the first slide. Now, I want to continue with the second slide. Okay, let me finish on this thing. Second slide is basically based on the previous slide that I already gave to you before the semester break. Okay, except that those slides I did not go into some of the example. Okay, this is the slide. Let me share with you. Okay, share, and this one. Okay, let me click. Okay, so this is the slide that I already mentioned to you because last time I just simply want to show because I want to relate to the Microsoft project that I did to give you some example. But now this one. Okay. Okay, let me just simply go very quickly. In a real construction project, even during tendering stage, you need to prepare what we call this organizational chart. Okay, why this organizational chart is very important for the client to see who are the team, whether they are capable or not, whether they are sufficient or not. And inside this team, you see there is a number of management team. This is what we call management team. Normally, management team and workers, we do separate them. Management team is not many. Okay, normally in any construction site could be less than 10%. Okay, the rest are the construction workers. So we separate management team and then workers team. And this is what we call the Gantt chart. Gantt chart or bar chart, okay, that reflect the overall project. This could be a master plan. There is no detailing being mentioned here. That's okay. We just want to get ideas. And then tabulation, okay? Tabulation of management team or even workers or machinery. Now we start with perhaps management team first based on organizational chart. You see, in Microsoft project, once you input the data in your resource sheet, you can see all this tabulation in what we call resource usage. There is a resource usage and task usage. You can click on resource usage, then you will get all this kind of tabulation, similar to what we are doing. Okay, but this one we did on Excel or simply manual calculation. And then this one is based on workers, manpower usage. You notice bricklayer, see, bricklayers, 10, 50, 50, 50, and 50. Why there is variation of workers? due to the fact that this project submission already gone through the revised version. Maybe when you did this thing first draft, your resource utilization might not be good. Then you do the resource smoothing, etc., etc. You will end up to be like this, where the value looks very nice. Why? Because this could be the final version. Okay, and then this is for machinery. As I mentioned to you, you can do resource leveling and smoothing on machineries and manpower. Why not on material? Because material, there are a lot of type of material. So you cannot do that on, it's too much, okay, too much work. And then see, this resource histogram, it looks very nice. Peak and then gradual decrease. Why it looks very nice? Because as I mentioned, the scheduler who did this program already take into account all the things. Okay, and then perhaps at the first time you do, it might not be looking at like this, but then you revise. Okay, you revise, you notice the project duration remain the same. We do not encroach into, see, we do not encroach into our project duration. Everything is within the project. Okay, now, all right, I already mentioned this thing last 2 weeks, but never mind, we just simply go through again. Okay, let's give one scenario. We do have list of activity, double-story building, and the bar chart for this activity per weeks is given. You notice this dotted line indicate total float. This activity do have total float. The one that doesn't have any dotted line, it basically have no total float. In Microsoft project or bar chart, normally the dotted line will not be shown. You can only know the values based on the one that you calculate, okay? But this is just to give you example how the total float would looks like in the real situation. So those are the total float. And then what you can do is do the plotting of a resource histogram based on this one. This one is 4, 4, 4, 4, and this one is here. All right, see the values here. The values based on when you add this value, this one is basically 4 number of people, this one is 4, and etc., etc. That's what you call the plotting based on early start date. Okay, you notice we do not the black bar chart here indicate the early start date. This is early start date. Early start, early start. Okay, everything is on early start. This is your resource histogram, how it looks like. Then you do the same based on late start date. The difference is basically here. You notice the total float is we put at the beginning of the project activity, where we push this one late start date, late start, and this one is also late start date. And then you see, we do have different histogram graph. Then you make what you can do is basically you decide which one is you are going to use. It looks like if I'm given the choice, I would rather use the late start, except that this one looks somehow in the middle of nowhere. Can we do something? This is 10. This is coming from where is it exactly? 11 day here. Here, this is the issue. 7 plus 3 equivalent to 10. But can we push? You see, this is very interesting. For instance, if we want to push this thing, you notice it's coming from here. We can push this activity to be like this, here, or even here, or at the beginning. But then it will not make much difference. Perhaps if we push that way, the protruding part would be here, for instance, instead of at the back there, because we do not have much choice, because there are very limited number of activities that we can move around. So it depends which one is which. It depends on you. But in this situation, it's not going to make much differences because of only this activity is affected. Okay, now, if you have so many activity, then only you can see you will appreciate the concept of moving activity around. Let's say there are so many activity here, okay? Now we already have early start, total float, resources, duration. These are the information that we need. That's why we what we call develop network diagram so that we get all the values. Okay, early start and then late start, total float. This is the sorting of activity already, sorting of activity, and then the plotting. This is based on early start. This is based on late start. Okay, so which one do you prefer? Okay, what normally in the academic or what we call concept, we can make even what we call overlapping. We can overlap the graph together. Then perhaps what we can do is basically, we can basically overlap and then we choose which one that we want to use. Okay, let's say we use the early start, sum of the activity, but then you choose the late start for certain activity, but we do not want this protruding graph. What we can do is basically, we can move certain activity around. If we use the late start, meaning to say we can move to the left some of the activity within the total float. You notice certain activity do have total float. You see, this one, this one. So this is the one that we are allowed to move around. And you notice anything that we do not encroach into the deadline. See, the deadline is always the same. See, the deadline is always the same. What we basically did is basically we choose certain activity to start as early as possible, certain activities start late as possible, as in this situation, but the rest could be start in between. Okay, and then only we can have a very nice resource utilization. So in that concept, we resolve some of the issue that we mentioned before. If people are not happy when there is no job, then there is no money for them, they will leave the company, try to get another job, and you will live with nothing, because it is nowadays it is very hard to get good workers. So you better manage your workers properly. Okay, all right. So again, the resource smoothing, this is what we call bad graph, this is good graph. We want to transform something like this, what we call resource smoothing. And then for resource leveling, this is the issue, we want to limit the resource, and then this is what we get. Okay, that is the difference between resource smoothing and resource leveling. Okay, now the last example. Okay, just last example. Let's say we do have AOA diagram. Okay, AOA diagram. What we need to do is basically to settle the early start date, early finish date, late start, late finish, and for sure we can get the total float. Okay, total float is the difference between late finish minus early finish, or late start minus early start. This is what we call TF, total float values. So you can get those values, and then what you can do is basically try to plot, try to do the table. This is like table one, based on early start. You see, early start date, and the one which basically have similar start date, then the determining factor is basically the total float. Okay, this I would say the sort number one, sort number two, and at the end of the day, this is what you get. Okay, so once you get that thing, you can draw the diagram as we already learned. This is what we call time versus quantity, and then the activity name is there already. So this is what we call based on early start graph. Okay, you repeat the same process, do that thing for late start, sort those things, and if there are two activity at the same time, use the total float, then you will get this list of activity, then you will draw this graph. Okay, you notice the difference between early start and late start graph. Which one is better? For me, late start graph is much better, except that there could be issue with 3-4, item number 3-4. Okay, now let's take a look at item 3-4 here. Item 3-4, what is the total float? 2 days. 2 days, if I want to move, I cannot move to the right because this is the late start. I can move to the left like this. I can move here or move here. Either one does not basically make a lot of differences between those activities. That's why when you want to move activity, you can move a few activity, not just simply one. One will not make the graph looks huge differences. But in this situation, the graph look good already. Maybe you just simply move activity 3-4 to the most left here, then it's settled. Okay, because it's only 2% extra on that particular day, so that is not too problematic. Okay, you notice we do not change anything. 16 days is the end of the activity, so we remain 16 days. Okay, this is what we call resource smoothing. This exercise is so smoothing. Okay, next, the last one is leveling. Using the same concept, okay, using the same concept, let's assume that we are going to use this diagram. Based on this diagram, because smoothing and leveling is basically using the same step by step, you need to have this kind of graph in order to look at whether it is you need to do resource smoothing or leveling. Okay, you notice that the maximum number of workers at most time would be 7. Here. This is 7. Let's say we want to limit the workers 5 only here. We limit at 5. What would happen? For activity 1, 2 is okay, 2, 3 is okay, 3, 5 is okay, but this activity will be affected. 3, 4, 2, 4, and 4, 5. Because those activity, basically when you add up with 3, 5, there will be insufficient number of workers available. So as a result, they need to be delayed, okay, for those activity together. They need to be delayed. What you can do now, if you limit to 5, you see, you notice, activity 1, 2 is not affected, 2, 3 is not affected, but then what else? 2, 4, 2, 4, and 3, 5. 2, 4, 3, 5, and 3, 4, why it is being put here? Well, again, when you want to prioritize activity, you must look at the logic. Which one is going to be done first? So if activity 2, 4, and 3, 4 is basically need to be done first, then they will get the priority. Then activity 3, 5 will be moved forward, and 4, 5, and 5, 6 will be moved forward. And you notice what happened to our project completion. See, 22. Previously, it was only 18. Now, we already pushed back our completion at 22 days. Is it acceptable? You need to ask yourself if it is still within your project time frame. So if this is this is the better solution, because you don't have to have a headache to get extra people working at construction site, and then you need to fire them the following days, then this could be the better solution. Why not? So because scheduling, we are the one that come up with the scheduling. We are the one that resolve the issue that we have. Okay, so this is what we call resource leveling. Okay, and sometime between trade, we can split in laborer, carpenter by the name. And you notice why there is an empty space here? Well, because simply there is no activity related to carpenter. If those situation happen, then perhaps resource leveling is much easier because a carpenter can work on when there is no activity required. They can utilize that period. Okay, you don't have to extend the work with regard to carpenter. Okay. All right, that would be example of resource